Thank you for that introduction, Mark. And yeah, so I'm Emma. I'm a second-year master's student. I'm currently working in the Water Security and Sustainability Lab at Maryland. But I did my undergrad at Pitt, hail to Pitt. And, and today I'll be presenting part of my thesis work, which is developing an agent-based model for investigating the use of recycled water in irrigation in Maryland. Why is that important? So water demand has increased a ton in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic region in particular. As we talked about today, precipitation is becoming more variable and reduced during growing seasons, and this threatens crop health, total yield, and we're also seeing economic impacts in farmers. And in the US, agriculture consumes an estimated 80 to 90% of our total water use, so a significant portion of that. And the figure on the right just shows you that even as our acreage is decreasing slightly, we're irrigating a ton more. This is in the last 20 years. How do we solve that? Well, so farmers have been irrigating to combat a lack of precipitation. This has caused significant groundwater declines in the Mid-Atlantic region. Around 48% of the region experienced significant declines, up to 80 feet in decline in some aquifers in Maryland. And so we're investigating alternative water resources, and one of those is recycled water. Different than what Justin was presenting on, the recycled water I'm talking about is treated wastewater repurposed. So there's two ways of doing this. One would be IPR, indirect potable reuse, and this is when you're using a secondary body of water. So you'll discharge into the body of water, allow microorganisms and bacteria to treat that water further. And then you can use that water. And then there's direct potable reuse, or DPR, which is what we're focusing on. And that's when you employ an advanced treatment after the regular treatment at a wastewater treatment plant, and then you can use the water directly from that. And in Maryland, class 4 treated water, so water treated to the highest quality, can be utilized for non-food crops and heavily processed crops. So we're already seeing this happen. There's around 2% of farms in Maryland using recycled water already. But there are major barriers. Some of these include social acceptance, feasibility, socioeconomic factors, and stakeholder conflicts. And so I'm actually going to go to this first. I wanted to just show you guys how this would look. Basically, this is what we do right now. We irrigate, we produce crops, we consume, and then we treat, but we don't connect this final cycle because of these concerns. There's regulatory and socioeconomic barriers and environmental health concerns. But if you connect the circle, we can support a circular bioeconomy, and that's just employing that extra treatment. So what I wanted to kind of approach in my thesis was trying to identify the biggest barriers of recycled water use in Maryland and how we could overcome them. To approach this, I'm using agent-based modeling, and this is a really unique tool. I say that because it allows for really unique heterogeneity in the model mostly, but for those who aren't familiar, agent-based modeling, or ABMs, are models that take a bottom-up approach. So agents are individuals, and they're assigned specific attributes, very individual attributes such as knowledge, attitude, perception, and these can define their behaviors. So each agent can have individual behaviors, and these can form social networks as well within a community or a network or a cluster. And so on the model on the right, this is a simple model. We have sheep and wolves, and so the sheep will eat the grass and the wolves will eat the sheep. And so there's different levels of behavior here, but through an agent-based model, you can see behavior, the emergence of patterns as well. So if we increase the sheep compared to wolves, we lose grass too quickly. If we increase the wolves compared to sheep, we lose the sheep too quickly. And so trying to balance out those models is kind of the goal of ABMs. And from that, you can see the emergence of behavioral patterns. Agent-based modeling is also really cool because you can use a spatial aspect as well. And agents can learn from their behavior over time. So these models are run on a temporal time scale as well, which I find kind of fascinating. To do this project, we conducted a survey. We did a preliminary survey, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And from that, we conducted we'll be finalizing a survey. And then there was some data cleaning and a little feasibility exploration that I conducted. And where I'm at currently is developing the model, and I'll kind of introduce some of the scenarios I plan on running, but I haven't gotten there yet. For my study sites, I'm focusing on 2 watersheds in Maryland. On the left, we have Zakia. This is in the southern Maryland portion. There's already confirmed competition for fresh water, but this area is less agriculturally productive, but it's also more racially and economically diverse. And then on the right side, we have Greensboro. This is the eastern side of Maryland / Delaware. It's a lot more agriculturally productive, but less diverse. And the map just shows corn and soybean distributions compared to developed area and wetlands and forested areas. And so getting to some preliminary results. So for a preliminary survey, we carried out 17 semi-structured interviews at farming conferences last winter and spring, and found that around 59% knew of treated recycled water in agriculture, 6% used recycled water, 65% said they already received enough water and didn't need it, but 100% were open and willing. But they all did note that cost was a big barrier, distance and feasibility was a big barrier, contamination concerns were still a barrier, and infrastructure and transport feasibility was a huge concern. So from these results, I went ahead and finalized a survey, and that's awaiting IRB approval, and we'll be doing that this winter at a larger scale at multiple farming conferences to get a larger scope of what Maryland thinks about recycled water. Looking at some water requirements in the Zakia watershed, we did a soil and water assessment tool model, a SWAT model, to find water requirements, and this is for different climate scenarios. So it ran for 2003 precipitation, so a dry year, 2007, which was a wet year, and 2009, which was an average year for us. And for the 2 crops, we found water requirements and then looked at wastewater treatment plant capacity. On the map, I just have 2 of the biggest wastewater treatment plants in the area, and that has the combined capacity is around 398 million gallons a year, which leaves a deficit of around 369 million gallons a year. So we were looking at, well, we can't provide everyone that amount of water then. So how could we prioritize this? So for a wet year, this is how many farms we could provide recycled water to, and then on a dry year, and then in an average year. So around 27% of farm acreage could be prioritized in Zakia. This is based on economics and as well as the treatment plant capacity and water requirements. Looking at Greensboro, similarly, we found that there was still a deficit of around 822 million gallons per year. So trying to find farms that we could prioritize looked a little similar. For a wet year, a dry year, and then again for an average year. Here we found around 41% of farm acreage could be prioritized for Greensboro. And then for my model development, my model, I plan to run 3 models. One is solely economic, so looking at the cost of recycled water, balancing production gain, and infrastructural costs, and then looking at a social side, weighing the farmers' attitudes, what their neighbors think, knowledge, tradition, social influence of their network, things like that, and then combining the 2 in a socioeconomic model to see what balances out, what comes out on top from that, and all of those models will provide the probability that an agent will accept recycled water for their farm. As well, I plan on running a few scenarios. I'll be running my model originally with some demographics collected by a previous study, and then when I get our survey results, I'll be importing those into our model and comparing how those differ. I'll also be running a cost share scenario. So what happens if the government covers 20%, 50%, 100%? How does it change? And then just some final simple takeaways. A prioritized system would be highly effective for equitable distribution of recycled water. We can see that larger farms with greater resources could easily adopt this practice more than smallholder agriculture, and so making sure that those costs are equitably distributed would be really important. And then that there is an interest in recycled water. This is really huge. I was at a conference in August, and one of my advisors was, or one of people were talking to me, my advisors, and he was saying that Maryland isn't like California, that we can't do this yet. So I think this is really important in showing that Maryland is ready for it, and that we could support it if we had the infrastructure and the idea of how much it would cost. That is all.
Thank you.